What's going on, guys? This is going to be your recap slash final power rankings video. I was going to make two videos this week, but I have been sick, and I'm sure you can tell that by my voice and the hoodie. But I'm just going to do one video, one take, and I'm going to go over the awards this year. I got 7 of them. And then I'm going to do a final ranking, comparing my preseason ranks to my final rankings and see where I was right and where I was wrong. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the awards here. So the fantasy football awards, these are going to be, we're going to stick to just players here. So there's going to be certain players that get all these awards, and we're just going to go right in, starting from the MVP. So who was the fantasy MVP this year? For this, I only included players on playoff teams. They were the only ones considered for the award, because just like in the regular NFL, you basically can't win MVP if you're not in the playoffs. And the MVP of this season is actually two people. It's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. These guys are technically two separate players, but when JoJo puts these two guys in his lineup, they basically function as if they were one player. And there's no doubt in my mind that this team was carried by this absolutely dynamic duo that really took it arguably to the next level this year. Whether it was the 4-touchdown game that Kelce had, or some of the explosions that Mahomes has had, it's really been an incredible year for those two players, and they really did the most to take JoJo's team all the way to a first-round bye this year. So that was really impressive. So that's going to be the MVP award for this week, or this year. Moving on, it's going to be the next award I have here is the Breakout Fantasy Star of the Year, and this one might be a little controversial. I didn't include rookies because they have a separate award, of course, Fantasy Rookie of the Year coming up. But this guy, I'm high on him as a player, but I was kind of low on him coming into the season. It was one of my worst takes from when I watched back my video about the preseason rankings, and that would be Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is the breakout fantasy star. Now, he has been a really good fantasy player in the past. There's no doubt. Some of you may not consider him breaking out, but to me, him being the number one back in fantasy this year is really stunning. It's really stunning. Especially with all the talk in the offseason about how the Raiders were probably going to get rid of him at the end of the year. There wasn't a lot of expectation. McDaniels in the past has used multiple running backs, but Jacobs has been as vital to his team as Derrick Henry has been to the Titans, and he's been more effective. So to me, Jacobs is going to be your breakout star of the year. Moving on, the aforementioned Rookie of the Year this year. That is going, for me, even though this guy hasn't played the whole season, he's been absolutely phenomenal in fantasy, and that's Kenneth Walker. So it's really between 3 or 4 guys. You have Dameon Pierce, who's had a great year. Olave has had an excellent year. Garrett Wilson's really went on fire, but Walker had, in spite of his recent injury, is still a top 20 back in fantasy, even though he didn't play the first basically 3 games of the season, or 4. I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 games, but he has been amazing, averaging about 14 points per game. And that's including some of the games where he didn't really play. When he's been a starter, he's been averaging probably closer to like 18 or 19 points. He basically was the big reason that Jake kind of separated himself from the rest of the league. So you have to give him a lot of credit, and he beats out all those other guys I mentioned. Hoping to see him back out on the field next Sunday, not this Thursday. Hopefully his ankle tightens up on him a little bit. All right, moving on to the next award. It's going to be the Mr. Volatility Award. So this is going to go to a player that is really up and down, and I think this guy has been kind of the poster child of that this year, and that's going to be Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis, originally drafted by Sean Bates. I questioned that pick when I reviewed his team, and overall, I just don't really like players like this. In general, I always try and go for consistent guys over boom or bust guys. Davis had one of the most remarkable fantasy games probably ever when he turned 3 catches into 33 fantasy points. That is pretty remarkable. But he has only caught 6 passes or more in one game this year. And he has had some real stinkers. And Ajit traded far too much to get this player. He knows that now. It's kind of been a storyline. A move that looked like it was going to easily get Sean Bates in the playoffs. That didn't really work out for Sean, unfortunately. But Davis definitely deserves the Mr. Volatility Award this year. The next award is going to be the Flex Award. This is a guy in one of those really finicky positions in fantasy, the flex spot, that can really boom for you, but it can also be kind of a hazard as you try and fill in a lot of times kind of spare parts, especially in a 14-team league. There's been one team that has not had to deal with that issue at all. The Flex Award goes to Brennan Costello for Alan Lazard and Garrett Wilson. I give him credit for both of these guys because early in the year, Alan Lazard was really stepping up and he was playing well. And then right about mid-season, he kind of got hurt a little bit, banged up, but that was right about the time that Mike White started coming onto the scene in place of Zach Wilson and instantly turned Garrett Wilson basically into a fantasy superstar. And so you basically had a seamless transition between 2 highly effective flex performers all year long, and the flex position has just not been really an issue for you, Brennan. It's one of the reasons why you were the scoring title winner this year. Congratulations on that, by the way. But yeah, those are going to be the 2 guys that win the Flex Award this year. Moving on. Sleeper of the Year. Sleeper of the Year is going to go to Justin Fields. Clearly, it looked really bad the first couple weeks of the year for Fields. He had a little bit of a decent game, kind of a fluky good game against the 49ers in the first game. But then he basically wasn't throwing any passes. They weren't really running him much either. It was just really, he was looking like a lost cause. Boston Monroe, though, picked him in the 170s. I think it was 171 overall. Just way down there at the end of the draft. It's kind of a afterthought pick. And he ends up becoming basically the number 1 quarterback for a long stretch of the season. And while this guy technically is the sleeper of the year, I almost consider not making him the sleeper of the year because Boston never once thought to put him in his lineup or try and trade him, which I think we all agree is not the best management strategy. If you were protecting against a Josh Allen injury, I think you may have needed to do that by just making the rest of your team better and not keeping a guy that you could have probably traded for an RB1 or a wide receiver 1. Both of those things your team desperately needed, especially wide receiver. So I'm going to give Fields the benefit of the doubt, though. I'm not going to discredit him because Boston never used him. And I'm going to go ahead and congratulate Fields on this. His running has been unbelievable. He probably could have gotten Najee. If he, judging by what he gave up to Gabe Davis with how much he likes these new era QBs, you probably could have gotten him to give you basically his whole team to get Fields. So I don't know. And then finally, the award that nobody ever wants to win. This was a close one. There's been a decent amount of really bad players this year that were drafted high, but the one that stands out and probably the guy that single-handedly kept this team out of the playoffs was just the fact that, Nate, you were never able to overcome really drafting Cam Akers with the 30th overall pick right at the beginning of the 3rd round. That is just really tough to overcome, and you were unfortunately were just 1 or 2 moments away from getting in, but Akers was the worst. DJ Moore and Kyle Pitts were also under consideration. But with Akers, it was especially with Kyle Pitts, I think it's more of a system and a coaching philosophy issue than a player issue. With Cam Akers, it's no question it was mostly a player issue. just not very effective. Hasn't been a good teammate. A lot of bad things you hear about Cam, so that's why he kind of got the edge in this, when there was really not a lot of quality competition in the Rams' backfield. I mean, all their running backs were so bad. Akers just, at times this year, he's been kind of the slightly better than shit type of guy for the Rams, but overall, just not been a good year at all. So we're going to go over rank by rank here for the last part of this video, and we're going to go over my preseason rankings versus my current rankings. The caveat here is that the playoff teams from this year, now that we know who those are definitively, they were all given one of the top 6 spots. So the playoff teams are 1 through 6, and then everybody else, regardless of points for or how your team's been doing recently, you're going to fill out the rest of the ranks. So let's go ahead and get going on that. So in the preseason, the team that I had bottom of the barrel, as we all know, I think we all had this player. Bottom was Boston Monroe. Give me more. Boston was down, way in the dumps on this one. I just thought his roster was a disaster, and it's really sort of improving right here. I didn't like his receivers much. I didn't like that his number one player. And honestly, my biggest concern with his team was Christian McCaffrey. He's actually been great. It's the rest of his team that's been bad. For basically from wide receiver 1 all the way down, hasn't really found a lot of way to get production here recently. So who is the number 14 team in the postseason power rankings? The number 14 team in the postseason power rankings is Boston Monroe. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, well, he was 6-8 this year. He wasn't last in points over the course of the season, so how could he be down here at last? Are you just doing this to try and make yourself look smart? So over the first 8 weeks of the year, so over the first half of the season, Boston's team was consistently in the middle to upper tier of the power rankings. He at one point was averaging, I think, 104, 105 points per game deep into the season. The last 6 weeks, the playoff push, when pushes come to shove, Boston's team has averaged 76 points per game over the last 6 games, which is almost half the season. 76 points per game. That is 12 points per game less than the next highest team. Boston's team has posed basically no threat to any competent team over the last 6 weeks. He's completely fallen off a cliff, even though he technically didn't finish last in the standings or last in scoring and everything. He went from being first in scoring after week 5 all the way to 11th in total, and he has just been a complete train wreck for the last part of the year, and that's why I gave him this last spot. Just I knew that I was getting in the playoffs because all I had to do was beat him, and didn't really put up too big of a fight, to be honest with you. Moving on, so the number 13 team I had in my preseason power rankings was Gabo McGregor. I didn't like his receivers. Now, he did have Amon-Ra, and he drafted Tyler Lockett, who's been a top 10 receiver this year. But he traded Tyler Lockett, and that gave him basically no chance. If he had kept Tyler Lockett, he might have had a whole different season. But his team has been dog shit. And part of that's due to injury, but it's been really bad. And I'm not so sure that Javonte Williams, even though he would have helped, would have made you a playoff team or anything like that. So where are you in who is number 13 in my postseason ranks? Oh, look at that. It's Gabo. So first 2 picks, I think I had him dead right. Gabo finished as the lowest scoring team by 40 points this year. So pretty well separated at the bottom. Now, he has been competitive lately, where I said Boston was averaging 76 points per game. Gabo has been averaging 88 points per game. Still not good, but he's at least been competitive and actually, I think, gotten a couple of wins here down the stretch. Even though he's the last scoring team, I think he deserves to be here. So I give him some credit. He's kind of bounced back and kind of managed his team to at least be relevant here down the stretch. The number 12 team, I'm going to put the number 12 team in my preseason rankings was Pablo Pablo finished with the least wins. Now, part of this was due to the fact that he had the most points against of the entire season, so it wasn't all just him being terrible. However, he was the second lowest scoring team this year. The concerns I had with Pablo's roster were mostly that he had a lot of old players, and I didn't really have faith in his top picks as much. I didn't think Zeke was going to do well, and for the first part of the year, I was right. He's come back and done better recently, but it was far too late. And some of the other guys you drafted just haven't been very good. Deebo Samuel's a good player, but he hasn't produced as much as he did last year. And just too many other kind of mistakes that you've made over the course of the year. So who do I have at number 12 in my current postseason rankings? That is going to be Pablo. Pablo is the number 12 team. So that's 3 for 3 for those keeping track at home. I think I'm justified putting Pablo here at 12. He has actually averaged about 95 points per game down the stretch run. So he has been improving, actually doing well. 13th in the scoring rank, so he wasn't even last in scoring, even though he was last in record. But yeah, Pablo, just not a good season for you overall at all. Very bad. The number 11 team in my preseason rankings was Ajit. Ajit took a lot of risks during the draft, and a lot of them were kind of starting to pay off. He was getting unlucky, and I think he panicked and tried to make that home run trade for Gabe Davis, and it hasn't worked out for him. If he had just stood pat, I think he'd have 3 or 4 more wins. He still wouldn't be a playoff team, but he would be at least more relevant down the stretch run. But that trade he made, he panicked. Having Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase was a really fun, great combination to kind of watch, and just ended up panicking a little bit prematurely there and getting rid of those guys. So with ETN as well being part of that package, very tough for you. So who was number 11 in my postseason power rankings? Ajit is number 11 in my postseason power rankings. So Ajit was actually the 10th scoring team. 10th? Wrote it down here. Yep, 10th. 10th scoring team. Actually finished with more points than Boston. Kind of underscores from where those teams were at the beginning of the year how bad Boston's team has been. Ajit's just, he has a high ceiling, but he also has kind of a low floor, and it could have been all a lot different if Ramondre hadn't gotten hurt and you would have gotten a win. You might have bumped up a spot, but I feel confident that my bottom 4 from the preseason were pretty much spot on. I guess the takeaway is I could spot kind of a bad draft when I see one. So speaking of not spotting a good draft, Brandon Costello was number 10 in my preseason rankings. That's an all-time bad take right there. I'll be honest. He had some Seahawks players. He had some players on teams I questioned. But it has all come up aces. He has Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs, an incredible back duo. He has DK Metcalf, who's a good receiver, and Stephon Diggs. He just put together a kind of team of kind of obvious guys that can get it done, and it's just worked out for him really well. And he was the scoring title winner this year, and I think he absolutely deserved it. He had a great season, and it started with an excellent draft. I didn't give him any credit for it, so I'm giving the credit to him now. Who was number 10 in my postseason power rankings? That would be Chris Hasenheier. Chris with Titan University, a team that started off, I would say hot, but kind of was just getting lucky with the scheduling. Really fell back down to earth, ended up finishing 9th in the scoring rankings, so well outside of the top 6 that you want to be at to try and be a competitive playoff team. Just didn't come together. Your team went from week 5 to week 12 without scoring 100 points in a game. That's pretty hard to do. Usually you just can kind of get lucky, but your team just kind of had no ceiling, which is probably due to the fact that you were consistently playing 2 tight ends. That's not good at all. So that was very, very unfortunate on your part for Chris Hasenheier. Number 9 in my preseason rankings was Chris. Chris was number 9, so I almost got that one right. Should have had him a little bit lower. Johnny Taylor just didn't really work out super great. He was injured a lot, and that just kind of proved to be a big hindrance. And then, even though you did trade for Tyler Lockett, which was smart, a couple bad decisions, just not really great season for you at all. And number 9 coming in my last power rankings is Fuzzy Palmer's Cam. Cam was languishing dead last for a couple weeks there in points per game, and he's fought back to be the number 12 team, and basically come within a couple points of being a top 10 scoring team. Really not that much of a difference between these teams. So Cam's actually been averaging about 97 points per game down the stretch. So it's been a really good finish for Cam. My main concern with his draft was coming in with Trey Lance, and that did hurt him. Although he did pick up Geno, who had some nice moments, but a couple other busts, Deontay Johnson and Dalvin Cook, even though Cook's been decent, hasn't had the consistent type of top running back season that you are accustomed to seeing from him. So that hasn't been good at all for you. Going to number 8. Number 8 in the power rankings for the preseason was Leicester. Leicester, a team that I have kind of always continued to say has kind of overreached this year. I liked, he went Raider heavy in the draft. I liked Devontae Adams. I liked a lot of his team. I actually thought Miles Sanders would not be very good this year. He was better. Your team didn't score a lot of points this year in terms of the scoring rankings. You were number 7, so technically outside the top 6, but you did have a nice little finish there. You finished strong to get into the playoffs. The addition of Bam Knight has really helped your team. That was a good waiver pickup by you, so I have to give you credit. Who comes in at number 8 on my final rankings? That would be Nate Solly. So Nate obviously was my most overrated team coming into the year. I had him at number 1, spoiler alert, but he is down here at 8. He was the 8th in scoring, and he's just, it seemed like the kind of season that should have worked out for him, but it just did not. He got really unlucky on that Monday night miracle in the Washington game. Essentially, you flip those two results around, he would have been in the playoffs and I would not be. So it came down to that. I'm very blessed, but single-handedly knocked you out of the playoffs. I'm sorry about that, Nate. But there was just a couple things you couldn't overcome. Cam Akers drafting was not good, and that screwed you up. Sorry, I'm very sick. Trying to work through this. The number 7 team on my preseason ranks, Sean Bates. Sean, you had a really, really good year. I said I thought this was your best draft ever. I still only had you at 7, but I should have had you higher. Now, to be fair, your team was kind of languishing before you made that trade with Ajit, and you instantly skyrocketed after that happened. So that gets a lot of the credit to you for that. But I think I was pretty spot on about your draft being number 7, and by consequence, yeah, you come in at 7 on the final rankings as well, because like I said, the top 6 playoff teams get the top 6 spots automatically in this ranking. Hey, they earned it. So sorry about that, Sean. You got really screwed over at the end of the year. It happens. I was that guy last year, kind of, with how many points I scored, and not getting in was very devastating for me, and you're just kind of that team this year. So better luck next year, but keep this blueprint that you got going for you, and I think you're going to have a lot of success in the future. Moving on to the top 6 spots. So I had myself at my preseason rankings. A lot of the question marks were about my running backs. The running backs I drafted were Dameon Pierce, who has been really good. Got him in the 5th round. Ramondre Stevenson, who has been good. Jamal Williams, who's been really good. I did draft Darrell Henderson, which wasn't great, and then I added Jeff Wilson Jr. right before the season. So my running backs draft was actually not really that bad at all. It was actually pretty good in hindsight. The thing with it is I had some real boomer bust types, and I tried to trade those guys to get Chubb, and it has so far been very mixed in terms of the results. I'm actually not really happy with that trade, how it turned out as it stands, especially with Herbert playing a lot better recently. But I went 0 RB basically this year. Didn't take a running back till the 5th round, over 60 picks in. But the guy did take Dameon Pierce is legit, and I've got Chubb. Hopefully he gets hot again and gets it done down the stretch. So who is number 6 in my postseason ranking? I have Leicester here. Yeah, Lester, I have you behind me. I'm sure that's going to just fuel your fire even more. I know you've been on my case this year for where I've ranked your team. I think that based on merit of just the fact that my team scored a significantly higher amount of points over the course of the year than your team, I think that merits me. to be a little bit higher. With that being said, with Damian Pierce being out this week, I would not be surprised if you beat me. That's a really bad loss for my team. I've depended on him a lot this year, and he's usually come through for me. Number 5 in my preseason ranks was Cam. A lot of things went wrong with Cam. It mostly had to do with the wide receiver position with Deontay Johnson. That was not a good pick by you. Deontay has just been a real underperformer. He's been so bad, he's been untradeable, hasn't even scored a touchdown all year. Mike Williams has been hurt a lot, and you just haven't really gotten anything going at the wide receiver position for the most part this year. And Dalvin Cook has been kind of a disappointment. He's on the fringe of the top 10, but when you draft Cook, you think you're going to get probably a top 5 guy, so he's underperformed by a little bit. You have 2 top 10 backs, but your wide receivers have just been so bad and kind of plugging and playing that it just didn't work out for you at all, unfortunately, this year. So who's number 5 in the final rankings? That would be myself. I moved up 1 spot over the course of the year to number 5. I think that's fair. I had the 6th most points this year. My roster I still like. Jefferson's good. Olave is very talented. If they had gone to Jameis Winston, which I thought they were going to go back to him, I think Olave's numbers would be even better. They haven't done that. It's been very disappointing and frustrating. Juju's had some really big games for me. He hasn't had the consistency that I was hoping for. And I managed to overcome Kyle Pitts' bust status to actually make the playoffs, which probably not a lot of teams could say that with the amount of draft capital that they invested in him versus what they actually got. Luckily, I did pretty well in the later rounds, so got up to number 5. Number 4 on the final rankings, or on the preseason rankings, was JoJo. JoJo was a team that was not getting hype. I liked his roster, though, and it's completely worked out in his favor. From 1-5 to 9-5, the best story in the league all year has been JoJo's 8-game winning streak. Just incredible. He was left for dead. Nobody had him on the playoff radar, and he just surged past us. And frankly, it wasn't even close most of the time. He was drilling teams with that Kelsey-Mahomes combo. So really, really good stuff from JoJo. Who is coming in at number 4 on the final rankings? That would be Let's Ride, Brandon Niblock. Nibs, I had you pretty high in the preseason rankings. You were the number 1 team kind of early on in the year, but your team has been solid. The trade I think that we made helped you. Your season was kind of slipping away, but you turned Chubb into a lot of value and kind of got you over the hump there. I'm really excited that trade worked out for you, and hopefully it'll start working out for me here soon. Moving on to number 3, Jake Smith was my 3rd ranked team in the preseason. Jake, I really liked your team. I thought your running backs were good. I didn't know that Dobbins was not going to be effective, but Walker was an even better replacement for most of the year for you. Cup's gone down. You've still continued to win games. This team is still kind of dangerous, even though you're banged up. I could see you making a run. You've done a really good job this year kind of managing the storm, and came in with the fourth most points. Yeah, that's correct, 4th most. So really impressive stuff, Jake. Very impressive. Who comes in at number 3? That would be JoJo. JoJo comes in at number 3. He rose up a little bit. He did better than even I expected him. I had him pegged as a playoff team after draft day. Made one kind of significant trade away Najee Harris. Tyler Boyd has had a couple of nice games, and A.J. Dillon has had a nice game as well. Trade's been kind of a wash. Najee Harris just hasn't been able to get really going this year at all. With that being said, we're moving on to the number 2. I had Nibs ranked number 2. Swift has kind of underperformed. Antonio Gibson, you started the year with Swift and Gibson. You've kind of gone through a lot of different guys, but you're settling in. Deontay Foreman. Recently, this is kind of why I put you up here, because I just know you're going to manage the thing really, really well, and you've done that this year. So really good job, Nibs. It's been really good for you. Who is number 2 on the final rankings? That would be Brennan. So Brennan goes from number 10 all the way up to number 2. Like I said, had to expose myself. I've got a lot of things right, but this was the one thing I got really, really, really wrong. Brennan's team was just excellent. He's a scoring title winner. Would have been number 1 in these rankings if he had just beaten Leicester this week, but he wasn't able to do that, so he gets bumped down to number 2. I've had a long-standing rule: you can't be number 1 if you lose. So that's kind of why. The number one team in the preseason ranks. This was another bad take exposed, although I don't think as bad. Nate Solly. Lamar's kind of injury here in the last couple of weeks, and just kind of things that haven't really gone right, kind of unexpectedly for you. I think this was still a good team. You still finished with a winning record. It just didn't really go the way it should have. I felt like it should have worked. Your team was just a little bit too high and low, and the valleys just exceeded the peaks a little bit more. So, unfortunately, I got to put you down at number 8 to end the year. The number one team, of course, Jake Smith, the Molesters. Kind of an obvious choice. Really, really good season for Jake. He was the 4th scoring team, but he got off to kind of a rough start with some of the injuries early in the year. And he's since overcome the Cooper Cup injury to still be number 1. That's real good management by Jake. He's had a lot of depth and it's been tested this year, but even Darnell Mooney was starting to get going, has now gone out. I think that you managed everything brilliantly, and I think that you definitely are a deserving number 1 guy in this ranking. That's going to wrap it up, guys. I'm really sorry about the low energy of this video. It's, last night I was laying there, I just felt like I got hit by a truck. Just absolutely, got a really bad infection here in my respiratory system, so just trying to work through that. Officially questionable for the 49ers Seahawks game tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go. I was planning on going, but hopefully the Niners win. I know a lot of you wanted me to take that video I made down. I'm one win away from not having to worry about that anymore. In Brock we trust. I hope he does a really good job. It's a great story. For you guys, I think you're not as far away as I thought you were. I will admit that, but your defense is really bad. Really, really bad. So please, for the love of God, when you get that number 2 or number 3 pick, take a defensive guy. Take the whoever the Quentin Williams of this draft is. It's exactly who you need. Take that guy, get it done. Stop the run. Stop the run. I'm going to sign off here now because my throat's really getting sore. But I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of meager effort that I was able to put forward. And it's been a really good year, guys. And I look forward to the playoffs. Peace out, guys.